She said it out loud. In my courtroom, in front of a full gallery, in front of the woman she had cheated out of $34,000 for 14 months of honest work. She looked at me and she said, "I don't answer to you." And I want you to understand something before we go any further. In 38 years on this bench, I have heard a great many things said to me that should not have been said. I have heard defendants lie with extraordinary creativity. I have heard attorneys argue positions they knew to be indefensible. I have heard wealthy people use their wealth as a sentence that ends conversations before they begin. But I had never heard those 5 words spoken to me directly. Not once, not in 38 years. What happened in the 10 seconds after she said them is why you are watching this video right now. Right now, before we go a single second further, subscribe to this channel and hit that bell, because what I am about to show you is exactly what we bring you every single week. And if you are not subscribed, you are going to miss the next one. And the next one might be even more important than this one. And drop a comment right now. Tell me where you are watching from. Are you in Chicago, London, Lagos, Sydney? Tell me your city, because I read every single comment and I want to know who is in this room with me tonight, because what you are about to watch is not just a court case. It is a question about what honesty is worth in a world that sometimes seems designed to reward the opposite. Stay with me. Every word of what is coming matters. Now, let us begin. Her name was Margot Delacroix, 51 years old, wife of Thomas Delacroix, founder and chief executive of Delacroix Logistics Group, a company with operations in 11 states and a valuation that made the local business press salivate every quarter. Thomas Delacroix was the kind of man whose name opened rooms. Margot had spent 26 years standing beside that name, and somewhere in those 26 years, the name had started to feel like hers too. Not because she had built it, because she had lived inside it long enough that the distinction had stopped mattering to her. That distinction was about to matter again. The woman sitting across from her in my courtroom was named Celestine Okafor, 43 years old, born in Lagos, Nigeria, arrived in this country at 22 with an accounting degree, a reference letter from a professor, and the specific kind of determination that does not announce itself because it is too busy working. She had spent the following 21 years building a bookkeeping and financial services practice from a desk in her apartment, then a shared office, then a suite of 4 rooms she had signed the lease on herself on a Tuesday morning and stood inside alone for 10 minutes before her first employee arrived, just to feel what she had built. By the time she came to my courtroom, Celestine employed 7 people, 34 small business clients, a reputation built entirely on one thing. She did the work correctly, she filed the numbers accurately, and she did what she said she would do. Margot Delacroix had hired Celestine's firm 18 months earlier to manage the Delacroix family's personal financial accounts, household funds, charitable foundation disbursements. Margot's personal discretionary accounts, which ran to monthly figures that made Celestine's entire annual revenue look modest. For 14 months, Celestine did the work. Every report filed, every deadline met, every communication returned. Not once in 14 months did Margot Delacroix document a complaint, send a correction request, or suggest that anything had been done incorrectly. Then, on the 15th month, at 11:47 p.m. on a Sunday, Margot sent a 4-line email terminating the contract, effective immediately, citing performance deficiencies and stating that no further payment was owed. $34,000 gone for work already completed, for 14 months of correct, uncontested, undisputed work. Celestine sent 3 invoices. No response. Her attorney sent a formal demand letter. The Delacroix legal team responded with 2 paragraphs. Termination for cause, no payment owed, matter closed. Celestine Okafor did not accept that. She filed suit. and the case came to my courtroom on February 11th. Now I need you to do something. Before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, before I tell you about the email, I need you to subscribe to this channel right now if you have not already. Because here is the truth. Less than 5% of the people watching this video are subscribed. And if you are one of the 95%, you are going to miss what comes next week and the week after and every week after that. We bring you a story like this one every single week. A story from this bench about what happens when someone who has never been held accountable walks into the one room built specifically for that purpose. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. It takes 3 seconds. Do it now and then come right back, because what is about to happen in this courtroom is something I have not seen in a very long time. Margot Delacroix arrived 18 minutes late on the morning of February 11th. She did not apologize. She did not acknowledge the delay. She looked around my courtroom the way you look around a restaurant you are not certain is good enough for you, sat down at the defendant's table, and immediately began whispering to her attorney, a senior partner named Preston Holt, whose retainer alone exceeded what most people in this city earn in a year. She had not looked at Celestine Okafor once since entering the room. I called the case. Celestine's attorney, Janet Kwan, presented the claim in 11 minutes. 14 months of documented work, the invoices, the non-response, the termination letter, and then the detail that changed everything. An internal email chain from within the Delacroix household, obtained through discovery, in which Margot Delacroix wrote to her personal assistant 12 days before the termination email, "How do I end a contract without paying the remaining balance?" The assistant had offered several options. Margot had chosen the termination for cause route and responded, "That one. Performance issues are always believable. That one. Performance issues are always believable." I want you to stop right here. I want you to read that sentence one more time. A woman wrote those words about a service provider who had done her job flawlessly for 14 months. She wrote them in an email. She sent them. She did not consider, not for a single moment, the possibility that anyone would ever read them out loud in a courtroom. That is not stupidity. That is the specific blindness that comes from never once in 51 years having been required to account for what you wrote. Drop a comment right now and tell me, have you ever done honest work for someone who tried to avoid paying you? Have you ever watched someone use their resources to bury a straightforward debt? Tell me what happened. Tell me if you fought it. Tell me if anyone believed you. Because in a few minutes, someone was about to believe Celestine Okafor completely, irrevocably, in front of everyone. I looked at Margot Delacroix after the email was read into the record. She was looking at her attorney, still not at Celestine. I said, "Mrs. Delacroix, I would like to give you the opportunity to respond directly." Her attorney rose immediately and spoke for 7 minutes. Contractual language, context, scope of discovery, the totality of the business relationship. It was competent. It was also completely useless against a sentence his client had written herself. When he finished, I said, "Mrs. Delacroix, the email in Exhibit 7 was written by you. Is that correct?" She looked at me for the first time since she had entered the room, and I want to describe what I saw in that look because it matters. It was not nervousness. It was not guilt. It was something more fundamental than either of those things. It was the look of someone who had walked into a room expecting it to function the way every other room in her life had functioned, around her, for her, deferring to the weight of her name and her attorney's retainer, and was beginning to register at the edges of her awareness that this room was different. She said, "I'm sure my attorney has addressed all of that." I said, He has offered an interpretation of it. I am asking you directly whether you wrote it. She said, I don't really see how that's... I said, Mrs. Delacroix, did you write the email in Exhibit 7? She looked at me with a quality of mild, practiced patience, as if my insistence was itself the unusual thing. And then she said the 5 words. She said, I don't answer to you. The courtroom went completely still. I removed my glasses. I let 4 seconds pass. 4 full seconds of silence in a room where 50 people were holding their breath. Then I said, Mrs. Delacroix, I want to make sure this court has heard you correctly. You have just told me in an open proceeding, on the record, that you do not answer to me. I said, this courtroom is not a restaurant. It is not a charity gala. It is not a board meeting where your husband's title determines whose opinion carries weight. It is a court of law. And in a court of law, every person who sits in that chair answers to this bench, regardless of their net worth, regardless of whose name is on their building, regardless of how long it has been since anyone in their life required them to answer for anything at all. I looked at her steadily. I said, you will answer my question. Did you write the email in Exhibit 7? The smile, and there had been a smile, small and practiced, the smile of someone performing calm they no longer felt, was gone. In its place was something I had watched arrive on many faces over many years, the dawning understanding that the room was not going to move around her. She said quietly, yes. I said, and the phrase, performance issues are always believable. That is your language? A pause, very long. The kind of pause that answers its own question. She said, yes. I said, so this court understands correctly that you selected the termination for cause option not because there were documented performance deficiencies, but because, in your own assessment, such deficiencies would be believable, whether or not they existed. Her attorney stood. I held up one hand. He sat back down. I said, here is what this court finds. The termination for cause was manufactured. The evidence is not circumstantial. It is documentary. It is in your own words, written by your own hand, preserved in a discovery record that you apparently did not anticipate would be read aloud in a proceeding you apparently did not anticipate would require you to answer for yourself. I said, Celestine Okafor worked for your household for 14 months. She filed accurate reports. She met every deadline. She did the job she was contracted to do without a single documented complaint from your side. And when the contract reached its final 2 months, you chose to avoid the remaining payment by attaching a false cause to the termination because, as you wrote yourself, performance issues are always believable. I said they were not, in this case, believable to this court. Here is the judgment. You will pay Celestine Okafor the full outstanding contract balance of $34,000. This is not a negotiated resolution. This is the debt you owe for services rendered, received, and deliberately not paid. You will pay an additional $18,500 in bad faith litigation damages. This court does not view the filing of a false termination for cause, the refusal to respond to 3 separate invoices, and the deployment of a senior partner to bury a straightforward payment dispute under procedural motions as a legitimate defense. It views it as the deliberate use of resources to avoid an obligation, and that has a cost. You will pay Celestine Okafor's full legal fees. She should not have had to spend money to recover money she was already owed for work she had already completed. The total judgment against you is $61,700 plus court costs. Margot Delacroix was looking at the table in front of her. The practiced calm was entirely gone. Her attorney was speaking to her quietly. She was not listening. I said, Mrs. Delacroix, one more thing before we conclude. She looked up. I said, "You told me earlier that you do not answer to me. Let me revisit that. Outside this building, in the world you occupy, that statement may function as true. You have resources. You have representation. You have a name that has opened rooms and a position that has, for a very long time, meant that consequence was something managed on your behalf before it ever reached you directly. Inside this building, that sentence means something different. Inside this building, everyone answers. Not to me personally, to what I represent, to the idea that what you owe someone for work they have done is not optional, that a contract is not a suggestion, that a woman who spent 21 years building something honest deserves to be paid for the honest work she delivered, regardless of whether the person who hired her has grown accustomed to a world where that kind of thing can be managed away. I said, today, it could not be managed away. I hope that is instructive. The gavel came down. Celestine Okafor sat very still for one moment after the judgment. Then she gathered her documents, stood, and walked out of that courtroom with the same composure she had walked in with. The composure of someone who had spent 21 years doing the work correctly and had simply needed one room, one morning, to confirm that it had mattered. That is what justice looked like on February 11th. Not a dramatic speech, not a broken woman in an expensive coat, a 43-year-old woman who came to this country with a reference letter and a determination that never announced itself, walking out of a courtroom with $61,700 she had earned, and a verdict that had taken 14 months to arrive, and a woman who said, "I don't answer to you," learning in exactly 10 seconds what those 5 words cost when you say them in the wrong room. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever done honest work and watched someone try to erase it, leave a comment right now. Tell me your city. Tell me your story. Are you watching from New York, from Lagos, from London, from a small town where the powerful have been getting away with exactly this for years? Tell me. I read every single one. And share this video right now with one person in your life who needs to see it. Not later, right now. Someone who is fighting for what they are owed. Someone who has been told their work was not good enough when they know it was. Someone who needs to see that there are still rooms in this world where the size of your husband's company does not determine the outcome. Subscribe to Courtroom Justice News. Every week I bring you a story from this bench that I believe the world needs to hear. Not because it is dramatic, because it is true to something most people still believe in, even when the world makes that belief expensive. What you owe for honest work is not optional. It never was. Courtroom Justice News. The gavel doesn't lie.